Hello, good day to one and all. This is Miss A. Krishna Sundar, Assistant Professor, Department of English, KAHM Unity Women's College, Mancheri. Today, we are going to discuss one of the most popular plays written by the Russian playwright Anton Chekhov, which is titled as The Bear. In part 1, we had already discussed the entire storyline along with the characters. So today, in part 2, we would be focusing on the author, the background of the story, themes, and characters. So to begin with, here is the writer, Anton Chekhov. Now, this slide will give you an outline of Chekhov's life. You can see the first picture where you can see him as a young boy. The next one is during his college days. The third picture will show you the transformation from boyhood to adulthood. Then you can see him as a middle-aged man and then again as an old man. So looking at the biography of this author, he is known as the greatest short story writer of all times. He was born to Yegrovich and Yevgenia, and it is believed that his mother was a great storyteller. So we have to assume that he got this skill of narrating in the most beautiful way from his mother. He is one of the most popular Russian writers, and it was with the introduction of his plays that early modern period began in Russian theatre. He was a doctor by profession and he initially wrote for money. He himself once stated, "Medicine is my lawful wife and literature is my mistress." He became an ambitious writer gradually. His style was difficult for the then audience, but he believed an artist should ask questions rather than answering them. He married Olga Nipper in the year 1901 and he died of tuberculosis in the year 1904. So here is Chekhov's birthplace. Now this is the Chekhov Museum. Now here you can see this is a poster of the very same play, The Bear. In Russian, it is written as The Boar. So moving on to the background of the play, this is one of the most cherished plays written by Chekhov. Now this is known as a farce. Now what is a farce? Now farce is a dramatic genre which consists of crude characters and improbable situations. And it is from these crude characters and situations that the comedy of the play emerges. Now this is a one-act play and the second title or the subtitle goes like this: A Joke in One Act. Now this play is all about pretension, artificiality and falsity of the feudal middle-class Russian society. So this is a blend of contradictory and confusing situations. So moving on to the main characters, we can see there is a young lady whose name is Elena Ivanovna Popova. She is a widow. She lost her husband and her husband's name is Nikolai Mikhailovich. Then there is a protagonist, the hero of the play, whose name is Grigory Stepanovich Smirnov. And finally, the character Luka, who is an aged footman. Now regarding the location of the play, the entire story happens within the drawing room of Popova's household. It is also believed that this play was dedicated to Nikolai Nikolaevich Solotsov, who is a very dear friend of Chekhov. The play, The Bear, A Joke in One Act, was written in the year 1888. So as mentioned before, this was dedicated to Nikolai Solotsov. Now this is a very close friend of Chekhov the boyhood friend of Chekhov, and he was a director and actor as well. The comedy of the play emerges from the character's lack of self-knowledge. So this is a crux of the entire play. Now Popova believes that she is still mourning the death of her husband, and Smirnov believes that he is a misogynist. But when we come to the end of the play, we realize that Popova changes and Smirnov changes. Popova forgets her husband and she falls for Smirnov. In the very same way, Smirnov, who claims to be a misogynist, proposes Popova. So these characters are actually known as Alizones. Now, Alizones means stock examples. Now, these kind of characters were introduced for the very first time in the Greek theatre, and these characters are basically known as impostors. So, impostor means a character who might see himself greater than he or she really is. So, here Popova and Smirnov, both of them can be grouped into the category of Alizones. Moving on, this is known as a farce vaudeville. Now, this is a theatrical genre born in France. So this is not something which is serious, so there is no psychological or moral intention, and moreover the entire thing would be mixed with songs and dance steps. So this is actually a trivial kind of writing. Now soon after completing the play, this is what Chekhov wrote. Just to while away the time, I wrote a trivial little vaudeville in the French manner called The Bear. Alas, when they out on New Times find out that I write vaudevilles, they will excommunicate me. What am I to do? I planned something worthwhile and it is all tra-la-la, which means he wanted to write something serious, but whenever he begins writing, it ends up in a trivial way, in a comical way. In spite of all my attempts at being serious, the result is nothing. With me, the serious alternates with the trivial. He was inspired by the French play Les Girons de Cadillac by Pierre Berton. The play premiered in Kosh Theatre in Moscow on October 28, 1888. So let's have a look at this important theatre, Kosh Theatre in Moscow. So moving on to the different themes of the play, let's get into the first topic, the significance of the title. So here I'm just mentioning certain points as bullet points, which means you will have to expand these points so that you will get enough material to convert it into a paragraph answer or as an essay. So the title here is The Bear, which is otherwise known as The Brute. So the title here is a title which is closely associated with an animal. So maybe what the author wanted to suggest here is something related with characters who are not so civilized, characters who are not so polished, but appears to be sophisticated and refined. So as we all know, the play is a farce and it is all about the folly of pretense. So following social conventions can hamper your real likes and dislikes. So this is the actual truth which is coming out from the play. When we look at human beings, we all have two separate identities. Now one is our personal identity and the second one is a social identity. So personal identity is what we are actually within our homes. But a social identity is something which is very different, because a social identity is what you appear to be in a society. So here the author is trying to say that social conventions can really create a lot of change in your character. So maybe Popova is mourning the death of her husband, and Smirnov is trying to project himself as a misogynist because they want to follow the rules in the society. So the title here is a reflection on how the entire play operates. Now, this was a play written during the Tsarist period in Russia. So, this is something which you can really compare with the Victorian period in England, which means there were a number of rules and regulations which dominated the society. So, the central theme here is a very thin line between anger and passion. Now, see, if the refinement or the civilization of a human being is taken away, a human being then becomes a real animal. So, in one way or the other way, we become slaves to our own emotions. So, the play here is again a thin line between love and hatred. So, if you look at the main characters here, we understand or we realize that their emotions dominate them and it is not their reason. And in many occasions, this is quite natural. When you look at human beings, in many circumstances, it is always the emotion that can rule us rather than wisdom or reason. So, the main message of the play here is that we need to live and love without following society's standards. So, sometimes it is fine to be true to your own emotions, but sometimes we all hide a lot of emotions that we have got because we live in a society. So, this mask is actually taken away in the case of Smirnov and Popova. Now, Smirnov says this is a dialogue that he says. He says, I'm so fed up with myself, falling in love like a schoolboy, kneeling down. It is enough to give you the willies. I love you. So, this is how he finally proposes Popova. Now, Popova initially makes this statement, I shall never go out. Why should I? My life is already at an end. He is in his grave. So she's talking about her late husband. And I have buried myself between four walls. We are both dead. So she is again substantiating the statement that her husband is literally dead and she is psychologically dead. So she's trying to prove to the society that she is very faithful to her husband and specifically to her late husband. On the other hand, Smirnov is trying to keep himself away from all women, but finally both of them, they fall in love with each other. So the term here, the bear, is the name that Popova calls Smirnov because Smirnov appears to be very aggressive. So she calls him as a bear, the brute, or the unsophisticated. But when Popova calls him as an uncivilized person, as a bear, Popova herself is behaving in the same aggressive pattern. So they are the two sides of the same coin. So the play drives home the fact that human emotions are so tempestuous and unpredictable because it takes only a minute for a human being to become an animal. So this message is conveyed right from the title itself. So moving on to the next topic, this is about loneliness and companionship. So this is again another important dominating theme within the play. So we all know that man is a social being and togetherness or interdependence is an emotional or psychological necessity for a human being. Now, Aristotle, the great Greek philosopher, has once said, he who is unable to live in society or who has no need because he is sufficient for himself must be either a beast or a god. So, if you are an ordinary human being, it is difficult for you to live a lonely life. You will have to depend on others, others will have to depend on you. So, companionship is a mandatory condition if you are leading a normal life. So, you can once again mention these characters. I'm not going into those points again, that would be monotonous. You can talk about Smirnov and Popova, how they used to be lonely in their life and how their emotional need for companionship finally emerges. So you can mention the entire situation, you can mention the characteristics of these two people, you can talk about their previous condition, you can also mention how the transformation can happen here, because companionship is a necessity for human beings. And in this context, I would like to mention the name of a few Hollywood movies. Now, one is Castaway, which is a very famous movie in which Tom Hanks is the protagonist. And in this movie, he plays the character of Chuck Nolan, who travels in a plane and the plane crashes. So, for a period of 11 years, he gets stuck in an island without any other human beings. So, he leads a complete lonely life here, and after 11 long years he gets back to his country. So it's a beautiful movie. You will understand what loneliness is if you watch this movie. The second one is a movie which all of you might be very familiar with. This is Life of Pi, and there is a scene in this movie. Now, Pi gets stranded in water. So he's traveling in a boat, and the only companion that he has got is a Bengal tiger. Now, there comes a situation when the boat reaches a particular place, there is a jungle which is seen over there, and the tiger very happily escapes into the jungle. But now, even though it is an animal, not just an animal, a violent and ferocious animal, when this animal leaves the boat, this animal had been the last companion for Pi. And when this animal leaves into the jungle, tears actually flow from Pi's eyes. So, this is a beautiful message about loneliness and companionship. Again, another movie is Gravity, which is again a Hollywood movie where the main lead is done by Sandra Bullock. So, here she gets stuck in the outer space when she goes with a particular mission. So, she is stuck in the outer space. So, again, it's a wonderful movie, and it shows how she is able to get back to the earth finally. And again, there is one more movie which is titled as The Martian. Now, this movie has Matt Damon as the main actor, and the character actually goes for a space expedition to Mars and he gets stuck there. And it's beautifully done, like how he converts the entire place into an agricultural field and how he starts living there in Mars alone. So, all these movies will definitely give you glimpses of loneliness and the need for companionship. So, moving on, the next one is the role of emotion. So, this is again a repetitive kind of topic. So, I would be just touching the main points. So, we all know that man is a slave to emotions. Now, Smirnov claims to be a misogynist, but he falls for Popova. Popova claims to be psychologically dead with her dead husband. So effectively, she says she is finished with love, but again, she too falls for Smirnov. So human beings cannot restrain the basic feelings. This is what Chekhov wanted to convey to the audience. So the emotional display that we showcase in the society can sometimes remain just as a temporary emotion. So you would become an imposter, and you can again compare these characters with Alizones. Moving on to the next topic, love. So this is again a repetitive point. Now, love is a basic demand of human beings. Both Smirnov and Popova, both of them, they say they are fed up with love. Now, Smirnov says he can even sit on a barrel of gunpowder rather than being with women. But all said and done, he finally proposes Popova. So they call each other different names. They start yelling out their previous bad experiences. They literally fight, but ultimately the need for love comes. So now let's analyze the character of Popova. So she is the heroine of the play. So I'll be just touching the main points. You can expand these bullet points. She's beautiful and romantic. She is a gloomy widow, and she is too sentimental when we meet her in the initial part of the play. She is mourning for her dead husband, and at some point it looks like she is taking a revenge over her dead husband because she herself claims that her husband had never been faithful to her. He used to come home very late and he never used to spend enough time for her. So even when Luca advises her to get married, she is very stubborn and she states that she is going to remain like this forever in her life. So this looks like a sweet revenge against her dead husband because her husband had proved to be an unfaithful man, so she wants to prove herself to be totally faithful, completely faithful to her dead husband's memory. So, in a way, you can see her as a conflicting character because Smirnov comes and he asks for the payment, and then the duel begins or the fight begins. So we understand that she is very short tempered and she is angry initially. She even goes to the extent of a real time duel. She takes the pistol, she takes the revolver. So you can see she is a woman who is making hasty decisions. She is very impulsive in her nature. And finally, when Smirnov proposes her, she still remains in a vacillating state. She is inconsistent. At one point, she tells him, please stay. The very next moment, she tells him, you can go. So she herself is not very sure about what she is doing. So she experiences conflicting emotions because on one side, it is a personal identity. On the other side, it is a social identity. So these two identities are coming into conflict. So in a way, she too is a bear because she is also a slave to emotions. So she is prone to rapid mood swings, but it is this fluctuation or it is this conflicting nature which is finally making her an amusing character. So moving on to the next one, this is a character of Smirnov. So he is the hero of the play. He is middle-aged, but at the same time, he is an attractive man. You can give this physical description. He comes from a respectable social status and he earns a decent income. Now he is called a bear, maybe because he is very aggressive in nature. That is why Popova calls him a bear. And more than that, he is very strong. He is physically strong, and maybe the way in which he behaves. He barges into her office room. Luca tries to stop him, but he doesn't listen to Luca. So maybe it is this savage behavior which makes Popova call him a bear. He lands in a financial trouble, and that is a moment when he comes and meets Popova. He claims to be a misogynist. He talks about his previous experiences with women, and we see he is also as impulsive like Popova. Now, when Popova goes for the duel, when she takes the revolver, instead of getting angry, he is actually admiring her. And finally, he proposes her. So he too has got this inconsistent nature. So sweeping change, that is what you can see in his character. But all said and done, this makes him funny and a lovable character. So with this, we come to the end of this session. So thank you very much for your patient listening. If you have got any queries, if you need more assistance, if you have got any suggestions, please feel free to get connected with me through my email ID. So thank you very much. Thank you.